afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Community Development Standing Committee for Tuesday, December 5th. Our chair is really sick today, so I'm filling in for him. So hopefully he's better soon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. And may I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Ted, seconded by Peter. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We need to approve minutes from the November 7th Community Development Committee.
With the addition?
We put that on under this second page under item 6A, status of recommendations to council, but we'll include that in the minutes that it was an updated motion.
There was an updated motion in those minutes, so we'll include that in the minutes under recommendations to council.
No, we'll include it in the agenda under recommendations from council.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yes. So moved.
Moved by Patty, seconded by Peter. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, on to our business of the day. Our first is the delegation. Crystal Tembrink and Michelina Hunter are here from the Squamish Food Policy Council to provide us with an update and perhaps talk a bit about upcoming plans. So I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Okay, thanks. Thank you all for your time. Thanks for having us. I think you all know that this is Mickey and I'm Crystal. So first I just want to acknowledge the folks who have been supporting us. So the Real Estate Foundation of BC, Vancouver Coastal Health, you folks, the District of Squamish, Ministry of Agriculture, and then the BC Food Systems Network, which is a provincial organization. And so I'm going to just briefly remind you a little bit about who is the Squamish Food Policy Council. So we are comprised of community members across a wide spectrum of food-related industries and sectors. So individuals, nonprofits, for-profits, food catering business, grocery store owners, the food inspector, Sarah, so city planner, and also member of council as well. And so we function as a bridge of citizens and civic officials to come together to advance municipal food systems and municipal food policy and initiatives that benefit everybody, all community members. And so the Policy Council meets regularly to discuss and make recommendations that affect change and current policies, facilitate new policy development related to food system, and hear presentations like you are now by community groups, experts engaged in food issues, educate residents, stimulate dialogue, initiate projects and partnerships, and try to have a good time while we're doing it. So the vision of what we're doing is that our food system will be economically viable, ecologically sustainable, and that our community will grow, harvest, process, preserve, and distribute food to all of its members while eliminating waste. A thriving local food culture that celebrates eating locally and eating together will support us in living healthier, happier, and richer lives connected to the land, the growers, and one another. And so currently we are made up of over 20 different organizations. We have over 40 individuals who are attending food policy councils. Some only attend one, some attend 3 or 4 throughout the year. And then we're also we're one organization, one food policy council, of part of just over 20 municipal food policy councils or local government councils all across the province. So we're part of a community of practice that is working on this movement, and we're just spreading our roots throughout the entire province, which is super exciting.
And here is a wonderful quote of the connection of agriculture to health. From Agriculture's Connection to Health, a summary of the evidence relevant to BC. The relationship between agriculture and human health in BC is complex and multifaceted. The availability of healthy food is an important determinant of health, but only one of many connections between agriculture and health. Agriculture influences food choices and healthy eating patterns and impacts a variety of social, environmental, and economic determinants of health. In other words, agriculture's relationship to the environment and its role as an economic driver have implications for human health. So a few of the Food Policy Council's accomplishments to date. We've brought in over $50,000 in funding to advance our work. A large chunk of that is from the Real Estate Foundation of BC. We've developed and brought forward the Squamish Food Charter, which is now adopted, established the Food Policy Council almost 2 years ago. We've co-hosted with the district 3 public engagement sessions to provide input into the OCP and establish the Food Policy Council's direction. We've contributed to the food system section in the OCP. We've been doing capacity building with the BC Food Systems Network and other food policy councils. We've helped initiate the agriculture land use inventory, which is almost done. And we have developed a Squamish to Lillooet food asset map, which I will try and bring up now. Oh, and it's not going to show it. I will.
Suspense.
You could help too.
We had so much trouble with the presentation before, so.
Oh.
Crystal, maybe while they're working on that, you can explain what the food asset
Yeah,
map is.
go for it.
Yeah, so the food asset map is a Google map that is available online to anybody, and it includes food assets in every community up the Sea to Sky from Squamish to Lillooet. So it includes things like community gardens, food banks, food skills programs, and farms, all kinds of stuff, and anyone can access it. And we'll be using the food asset map as an indicator for the OCP to develop our food assets. We don't need to bring it up.
Yeah, we
It's
can,
actually okay.
we will
can move
email
on
it
the
to you
next
so
one.
you can have a play on it later on, and we'll mention.
Yeah, we've actually had it sent to us.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It's excellent.
Yeah, thanks.
Very cool tool.
Yeah, it is, and we're just starting to do a lot. We're getting it out there now, so you can add it. If you haven't added it to your website, you can add it, and we're trying to get everyone who may be part of the food system in any capacity within the region to add it to theirs. So it becomes quite a useful tool, and then we're kind of keeping some stats on the users and whatnot.
I won't bring this next one up either, but we've also helped with the Young Agrarians UMap, which is a similar map, but instead of an organization creating the map, it's encouraging community members to upload their info to the map, and that is Canada-wide, I believe. We've also co-hosted with the Ministry of Agriculture, or we will be co-hosting an agri-food business planning program in January for growers and food producers. And I actually attended a similar workshop in May, and as a beekeeper, it was really helpful for me to develop our company's business and financial plan. So that is coming forward soon. We've been presenting and participating with the provincial food policy movement and also with the national food policy movement.
So moving forward, I first want to acknowledge that this presentation today is quite focused on agriculture and food and lands. But we do still a lot of work with the waste recovery and food security and food insecurity initiatives. But today we just gotta pick and choose what we're going to focus on. So moving forward, sort of what's in store for us. Our funding is still continues until the end of May 2018. And so we're really focused right now on how do we sustain the work that we're already doing. If we're not doing it, who's doing it? And so we're really working on sustaining funding for the Squamish Food Policy Council. We're really focused around on the initiatives that really hone in on systemic change and having huge impact in our systems. Focusing on both municipal and regional government. We were really quite focused on Squamish, but naturally a lot of the initiatives that both Lillooet, Pemberton, Whistler, and us are all working on, even though they don't have food policy councils, there's a lot of opportunities for sharing knowledge and also sharing assets, just like the food asset map. So we receive funding to do it. Why not include Lillooet and everyone in it so they mutually benefit from it? And Lillooet has some really great resources for us that they're going to be sharing with us. So we're trying to be efficient with the money that we do have. Next, I'll hand it over to Sarah to speak about the agriculture land use inventory.
Great, thanks, Crystal. I just wanted to give council an update on the ALUI, the land use inventory. So that was, again, a joint initiative between Squamish and SLRD Area D, and we partnered and received funds from the Investment Agriculture Fund. So the purpose of that inventory was to look at and collect data around the land use status of our ALR lands as well as non-ALR farmed areas and agriculture features. So we actually invited or had agrologists from the ministry come up in August, and we went out and I played chaperone for a couple of days, and actually while they did field work. And so that was a really interesting process. We received a draft of the inventory at the end of October, and so we're providing edits and just review to the ministry. And then before the end of the year, we're going to, it will be finalized, and we'll bring it and provide it to council. And we've talked to the Food Policy Council about co-hosting a presentation for the community and the Food Policy Council around the results. And so there are some really interesting highlights. And so of the inventoried area, we have a sense of how much is sort of within our like effective ALR, how much is farmed, what type of farming is going on, what kind of farmed areas are outside of the ALR as well, and how much is available for farming. I won't go into any detail here, but just to let council know that we'll provide that inventory hopefully by the end of the year.
Thank you.
And so that leads us to a big reason as to why we're here today, to sort of move forward on hopefully an agriculture plan. And so just wanted to provide you a bit of a background as to how this is relevant and timely. And what we're suggesting based off of dialogue with many folks across the province and experts who actually write ag plans, and Lillooet and some of talking to their planners who have actually executed 2 plans, one agriculture area plan, which was done in Pemberton, and is that area B? C. And then Lillooet area B was done in conjunction with the village of Lillooet, and that was an ag plan with a huge focus on a community-based approach, which is what we're really advocating for, because as we said at the start, the food system is complex, it's multifaceted, it's confusing, and we want to be able to encompass sort of some of the other food system aspects into this plan. And so we know that previously in the OCP, the old OCP and the new OCP has supported language around moving forward with an ag plan. And when we came here in January, we had asked that you support and allocate funding towards both an ALUI and an ag plan. And I know that the support was there to move forward with both initiatives, and the funding was there to move forward with an ALUI. And the ALUI, yeah, is still now, it's in a first draft. Sarah, I think, will be providing edits back to it, and then it will be completed. So we've done a little bit of digging just to give you an update on things, and I know for some of you who sit on the SLOD board, you'll probably know what I'm talking about or know more than I do. So the Investment Agriculture Foundation can fund up to $45,000 per community per plan, and that includes for both an ALUI and an ag plan combined. So to date, we've spent about, or the district has spent about $2,500, and so that still has, $42,500 that we can use or apply for at least. The Lillooet plan was around $60,000, and after we're thinking that because the area is smaller, it's been advised that this area will cost a little bit less, so planning maybe for around $50,000. And that one of the conversations that we've been having is who takes lead on it. And so we have an idea based off of conversation with some of the planners from the SLOD around perhaps, because it's been sort of off their radar, that we were thinking it would be an opportunity for the District of Squamish to actually initiate the ag plan if it's supported, and then that the SLRD can actually roll it out, and a task force will be created to help support the ag plan rolling out in the way and shape that we had envisioned it to. So that's just my planning. That's some thoughts from us. And then we're gonna go on to new development.
Did
So-
you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
back to
go
that
ahead.
slide, please. So a few things. I think looking at both the way Area B went about their ag plan with the District of Lillooet, and the way Area C did their ag ag plan, much more of a sort of a traditional ag plan. The community buy-in, the rollout has been so much smoother in Lillooet than in Pemberton, so I absolutely endorse that much more of a community approach as opposed to a sort of hard-nosed planning approach.
Yeah.
Different communities, different variables in there, but I absolutely think that that's the way to go. Question about the Agriculture Foundation money. When they say 45,000 per area, do they mean like Squamish could get some monies and Squamish Lower Regional District could get some monies and we aggregate them, or is it just simply Squamish and environs is eligible for this
So
money?
they did talk about, because there was collaboration on the one in Lillooet, even though the village of Lillooet never gave any money, nor did one of the nations that participated. So it primarily was funded from in-kind support, I'm assuming through Ministry of Ag, Investment Agriculture Foundation, and...
Let me reframe my question,
oh.
because I know, I'm familiar with how Lillooet was funded,
Oh, okay.
but because we're two areas collaborating,
Yeah.
could we in theory get up to $90,000 because Area D is eligible for 45,000 and we're, or would they consider us as one entity?
I think the
one
money is per
entity.
plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and it would be a joint
I assumed
plan.
that, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
We can
no,
double check too.
we did talk, we called Corinne from the Ministry of Ag and our regional agrologist, I forgot her name, who worked, Allison, who worked with us on the ALUI, and they were under the same impression, but I can always just clarify, I would assume, in total.
Sarah?
On the website for the IAF, I looked today and it says that the up to 45,000 is, they will fund 50% of the cash costs for a project up to 45,000. So it's based
Okay,
on
so it's
sort
not
of,
necessarily, okay.
yeah, on the cost share.
And on the last point, I'm fine with us. I think most of it's happening in and around Squamish, so I'm fine with us taking the lead with participation and the rollout. I need to understand what you mean by the rollout. I think obviously all
Yeah.
jurisdictions are going to have to deal with rollout, not just the SLRD, but and it's in our 5-year financial plan for 2018 last year, was it not? The ag plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe it's in the 2018 plan for SLRD.
So we've heard from them that it isn't, which is why we're here.
I know,
That with the SLRD in their 2018 current budget, there's no item list for it within the planning department, from what I understand. And so maybe that's a further conversation between you guys and them.
yeah, we just only had one budget meeting so far at the SLRD, and we didn't go over that specifically. But I know Director Rainbow is really keen to get it on this year's plan, and if they're not actually leading the plan, then it shouldn't be a problem for their work. But we can have that conversation.
Okay.
All right, Susan?
Thanks. First of all, excellent work. I really love the initiative to basically map ag land, but I'm wondering about a few of the criteria and about you've got an amazing vision, and I'm wondering about the strategy. Is the strategy more to, is it to provide access for low income? What are the criteria for ag? Is it just about mapping land? Is it about overall overarching where food is grown? Does it only take into account bare land, ALR land, or does it take into account future agriculture as far as industrial lands being used for indoor growth?
So my understanding is that the task force can then dictate that vision. And then when we put out the RFP,
Strategy.
yeah, the strategy for it. And so an ag plan is very much focused on ALR lands, and then there's sort of these add-ons. And so I guess it's a matter of how in-depth we want to get, how detailed, what our priorities are, what are the SLRD priorities, and things like that. Because obviously there's some urban agriculture that's already happening in Squamish that's not on agriculture lands. So And Brackendale is actually a more ideal place to grow than the valley anyways, due to sunlight and flooding, etc. So, and according to our regional agrologist, not according just to Crystal making things up. So, yeah, so I mean, from what I've heard, it can be quite moldable, and that's what the task force is there for, or the working group, is to really dictate that vision of what does the SLOD in the District of Squamish want to do, what are best practices, and how do we...
Right, so can I just follow up with that? So my concern is that you have a vision, but the strategy to get there doesn't include enough variables, like enough ways to actually get to, do we want to have agriculture fully accessible or localized into Squamish? And because we're just looking at ALR land, which we don't have enough of in Squamish, we barely have any in Squamish. So do we widen the plan to actually make the vision that we see food available, food more localized, or does the vision change and then the strategy to get there becomes making zoning and agriculture available in Brackendale, or how do we change the policy and make it something that we can actually implement at a larger level?
Okay. If I might just jump in, based on, there's a bunch of different layers and levels, so in terms of the agriculture planning, based on what I've seen from other ag plans, certainly there's a focus on ALR, but it goes beyond, so the focus is really around developing mechanisms to support and maintain the agricultural land base, and then also some ag plans have gone into ways to attract new farmers and increase that I think there is the ag plans are very unique to the communities, so they do go sort of beyond just focusing on ALR. But I think also in our OCP, what we've done from the food policy or the food charter, we've also highlighted there's an opportunity to potentially develop more of a food strategy, which would pick up on a lot of the other pieces of the food system and access, and so I think we can bring in a bunch and maybe merge that in with an ag plan, so maybe combine ag plan and some food strategy pieces as well. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight that sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I'll pause.
That's excellent, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And I just, Chair, I know there's more, and I just had specific questions about the slide, so maybe we should let them continue on.
Is your question about the slide tip?
Well, it's about all the slides.
Okay, do you want to
I
do the
can
last
wait.
one and then have?
Yeah, I can wait.
Okay, all right. Proceed.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the last update about what we've been working on. So recently, we've been working to develop, I'll just start. So many new developments are including community gardens in their plan, and we want to emphasize that there are many other valuable food assets that this community has identified through the OCP process is in need in our community. So for example, edible landscaping, community kitchens, farm co-ops, food forests, and also intangible social assets like food policy councils. We recently met with District of Squamish planners to discuss how we can integrate food assets into new developments, community space, or parks requirement. And the planners indicated that learning more about what other communities do and how these assets are managed. So, for example, managed through a community group, a strata, or through local government. So we're currently exploring what other communities require of their developers. So is it a fee per square footage or per door for new developments that can go into a funding pot to develop community assets? So, and this could potentially mean assets are created on a bigger scale for bigger impact. So like a community farm or co-op, for example. And that's one of the recommendations that the planners thought was a good idea, to develop these assets as like per community instead of just per development. Or sorry, per neighborhood.
So lastly, what we're asking for today is support and commitment to move forward for 2018 Ag Plan, of course considering the community-based approach and considering the food strategy ideas and stuff. We're on the same page with that. And then also consideration for financial support for the organization and the work that we're doing. And we do apply for a few $1,000s through the grant and aid, which primarily goes to $3,000 to be exact, which goes specifically to really the hands-on ground, the free workshops at Brennan Park, the food skill workshops, the community gardens and the edible schoolyard. But we're trying to sustain the work that we're doing, and we do think that it's important, but I'm sure everyone thinks that their work is important. But it also is along the same lines as some of the indicators or some of the goals that have come out of the OCP as well. And people of the community have, deemed food and food assets and a healthy food community as an important part of Squamish. And so we're throwing it out there as a consideration. And how we move forward with this, we can talk about that. And we can talk about what other communities do as well. So happy to let you know about that. But happy to answer any questions on anything. We know we opened up a can of worms.
Thanks, Minnie. Thanks, Crystal. Ted.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, based on the programs on the Knowledge Network recently, we really do have to move on this. They have a big two-part series on food right now. And so on the district edibles, like us planting edibles, and I know it's nice to know what other communities are doing, but I think we shouldn't be afraid of trying to be first out of the box on stuff like that, because we have, for example, we have Waterfront Landing, which is 900 units on 30 or so acres, and I was looking at their landscape plan, and they have all these trees, and I said, why don't you plant nut trees or something, because I don't know if bears, of course Bear Aware says don't plant anything that bears want. So we have a conflict there, but I think we should look, the planning department should look at us initiating this kind of stuff because we're in such rapid growth right now. We can go, oh, well, let's look and see what other communities are doing, and then meanwhile, another 100 acres is developed. So
Ted, if I can briefly comment on that, we did actually talk to the planner, Susie, for the water.
Susan
Yeah,
Stroud.
oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
spoke to her and talked about just where some of the guidelines come from for new developments, and so we're actually, that's in our moving forward
Yeah.
piece in terms of integrating a few suggestions in there for like pollinator corridors, making sure that there's no neonics in the plants that they're purchasing which kill bees, which doesn't really support
Yeah.
our food system, and obviously working with the other constraints of WildSafe BC and finding some common ground somewhere.
Well, that's
But those
good.
are really good suggestions.
Yeah, that's really good that you're in there on that, and I'm glad staff's getting you guys all together. And then someone else touched on agricultural land, so all these maps and everything we're doing on agricultural land. Brackendale's a really hot spot for planting, and so is off Loggers Lane, Robin Road, and all. I mean, that is about the best of the whole valley, is that little area. So, we have people wanting to develop in there and subdivide, and put in 10 homes where there's a 2-acre little spot, so. That's something if we want to move on, it should be done. And then the last thing is, you talked about provincial government and federal government, SLRD and Squamish, and I didn't hear any school board.
Oh, yeah, so we do work with the school district, currently with the Mountcrown Elementary School on their edible schoolyard
Yeah.
project. And yes, every school wants one, but we do not have the funding or the capacity right now to do it. We're just about to put in a 20 by 30 foot greenhouse in the spring at Mountcrown as well. So we're expanding the program there. And we're working with the school district right now on actually possibly trying to use some land that they own that could be farmable in partnership with them. So stay tuned.
So, well, on the schools, I would think that the schools would want that in their curriculum. Why isn't the biology class and all that?
It's funding constraints.
Yeah.
They don't have money, the PACs are fundraising for other things and some food programs as well, and community groups, everyone's limited on funding.
Although you teach, you know, like I remember when my kids were in high school, and I went to the high school to try and get them to teach the invasive species in the biology class. And the biology teacher there had been there for 20 years teaching the same course. And I thought, okay, I couldn't get them to put invasive species on that. So maybe it's a bigger,
Yeah,
there's a
and
bigger,
I'm happy to chat with you anytime about the school district partnership too, and where we might be going with that.
yeah.
But they're on our radar. Yeah, thanks, good
Other than
suggestion.
that, I think it's great. It's my
Yeah.
favorite, one of my favorite things.
Yeah, thanks Ted. So I have Doug, then Peter, then Patty.
Thank you. It was just a question, and maybe to Sarah, or maybe to you. With the inventory or with these ag plants, is it purely arable lands, or do you contemplate possible locations for greenhouses, for example? Something that's perhaps more of a light industrial use. Is that part of it? And I'm not just thinking about marijuana production, I was actually thinking...
Wasabi?
Yeah.
We have been contacted by the wasabi folks.
I wasn't thinking about that. I don't like wasabi either. Sorry.
No real wasabi, we don't get real
I like the
wasabi.
real stuff, yeah.
Probably couldn't stand the wasabi.
No, it's way down.
Anyway, I was just curious about
Yeah.
that sort of the non-land part of it, or within a building type of agriculture is something, because when I think of Squamish, for example, I think we actually have very little large tracts of land where you could start a farm or anything like that within the district's boundaries. But there might be areas where you could have greenhouses or hydroponics or things like that to produce food.
I can jump in. Certainly within Squamish, right now we have just under 800 hectares of ALR land. However, just so you know, not all of that is actually available, and some of that ALR land is actually within water courses, in fact. So, and then also further land that's within First Nations Reserve as well. So there's less, but within the greater kind of Squamish River Valley, so Squamish and Squamish Valley, there's almost 4,000 hectares. But certainly on the inventory side, the ministry was looking at farmed and ALR lands, the land base, so not looking at opportunities for like food production within other areas or urban agriculture even per se. But in the ag planning, that's where we could look at a whole array of opportunities around food production and advancing food production within the community. So.
And actually, I'm going to change the subject, but just, I mean, is it feasible for us to take the lead in this? And I'm thinking more from the staffing perspective. If we wanted to see this happen in 2018, is that something that's realistic for our workloads and staffing and so forth?
If I may, I think we need to take a look at the rest of the projects that we have planned for 2018 and then assign some priority. We may not be in a position this year unless something else gives to take the lead, but we may be in a position to be in a supporting role when it comes to getting funding.
It's a budget decision.
Well, then staff availability.
That'll be prioritized.
Sarah, based on your support for the ALUI, do you have a sense of, from Lillooet, how much staff involvement is required for an ag plan?
No, we haven't scoped that out or had those sort of more detailed discussions at this point.
Can we do a little research so when we come to budget, we have a sense of the staff support that would be required?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are you good? Peter?
Yeah, I know that every other school in the district has Mam Command because they come down there and see your garden, and then just everybody wants one. And I know, as you said, the PACs are usually pretty stressed with all the other activities they're trying to support. My kids go to school at Brackendale, and I know that they would love to see something like that there. And I just think that there's also the possibility existing of maybe just saying, you know, can you guys allot some funds towards this thing, and then if the word got out there in the community, because we have such a great community here of people who want to give from their businesses and of their time, that maybe a garden could be designed and built through something like that, because I've seen those kind of things already happen at our school in particular, but I'm sure all the others in every other neighborhood would probably be willing to, you know, find participation from amongst that neighborhood to help further that. So that's something that might be explored. But to the line that you have here, we're currently exploring what other communities require of their developers, example of fee per square footage. So maybe this is a question to Gary. Would this be rewriting like a community amenity contribution policy?
Yes.
To create something that, so it could go towards a garden like that, or whatever it may be with community farm.
I think maybe the context of what we've been talking to the food council was more about having the space. You know, we often see inside developments a dedicated community garden as part of their open space. And so what we were talking about was exploring whether a better alternative to that would be having developments pay in as opposed to doing it on site, doing a neighborhood-wide initiative where the district collect some funds and then put improvements on a park that's in the neighborhood to kind of have a bigger, so that there's a wider benefit to that community garden than just development itself.
A lot of times with food assets, if I can just add, it's one thing to build them, it's another thing to sustain them. What do they look like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road when we've already sunk in $200,000 of capital to build a huge community co-op? So long-term thinking for consideration in terms of the success of the program. Are people going to learn skills? Are we actually changing the system? So throwing that out there.
And I really think that to that point, the educational piece for the kids in school is one of the key pieces for into the future, the concept right there. Because the kids love it, for one, and it's just such an educational piece for them to learn, be able to grow their own food, eat it, learn how to take that home with them and show their parents and all of that. So, well done.
Thanks. Patty?
Yeah, great job. I'm looking forward to seeing the mapping, inventory in the next month. And as you've heard, this will go to budget in terms of determining, it was in last year's 5-year financial plan, so obviously we have to see where we've gotten on some existing projects, but this has been something I've been wanting to get for about 12 years now. So, and finally the SLRD and Squamish are kind of aligning a little bit more in their timeline. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward with this. How it actually gets done and who leads, I think that's where a bigger conversation needs to happen. I'm looking for something generally quite a bit different from Area C. I mean, Pemberton's a very agrarian, farm intensive place. And I'm looking for a kind of a cross between some more traditional agricultural, but some real innovative approaches to how do we integrate it into large lots, into urban developments and all that sort of thing. So, and we've talked about all that, and I don't want to reiterate it all, but I think we need something quite unique compared to Area B and Area C, just because of the population growth here and the confines of our geography. But I think I don't want to lose momentum. We've got the mapping, getting the inventory. I think moving forward on the next step would be fantastic. And there's something else that I forgot, so good job.
Thanks. And we might also say there is some additional funding elsewhere if we need to, and then we're also a resource as we do have time allocated. Our time is covered until the end of May. So you have us as a resource, and if we can help in any way move this forward, we're here.
Okay, so I know you had 2 asks up there. Patty said the ag plan was in our 5-year plan. The deadline's come and gone. We were talking about grant aid last week.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about that policy is that we will support operating funds for a year, but not sustain operating funds. So that's one thing to sort of keep in mind in terms of an ask from the district about what it is we would want under the grant aid policy.
And the logic to that is we want to help community groups get up and going, but we shouldn't be looking for sustainable funding for us.
Yeah, so all I know is from connecting with the 20+ municipality, local food policy councils across the province and across the country is some of them and most of them received receive some funding, sometimes on a one-year time, you know, to get up and running, like $10,000, $15,000. And some of them actually receive a sustainable fund just to keep it going, because there's been huge value with food policy councils. And we'll be having this conversation with many folks, but you're one of the close partners on the list, and so we just want to throw that out there as a consideration. And if there's something more formal or more official that you would like us to do, we're happy to do that. I know it's kind of random to pop it into a presentation, so. And oftentimes that's out of the grant and aid. It's not out of the grant and aid program. It's I guess a one-off, like you had said.
Yeah, and so if you look through that policy, and certainly groups like hospice and Alzheimer's Women's Center, and so there's in-kind support we can provide for the use of our facilities, which you know through your other applications, and then supporting specific programs or activities of the Food Policy Council for year to year, which we do for other groups. Okay, and we do provide 3-year funding now, so you can apply for funding over 3 years.
Okay, thanks.
And we do have a bit of a partnership, definition, status, I don't know what you want to call it, that we have with other organizations like BIA, Tourism Squamish, SORCA,
Not SORCA.
Not SORCA, the other one. And we're exploring it with the Arts Council. So, I mean, in theory, as things evolve, that may be an approach if it feels right, if it works.
Great. Thanks, you guys, for your great work in our community. I know I've had fun being a council rep on the food policy. There's always food there. It's good.
Next meeting, New Year.
Now we see.
And yes, Linda.
Okay, the chair, just wondering at this point, obviously, that I don't believe the food council has come forward with a formal grant name.
No.
So, are we asking that we do it next year, or is it still contemplating a application?
Well, let's see, why don't they submit something and then we'll, what do you think? Sure, it's right through here.
I think it's up to council. I mean, we have a deadline for a reason, but
Yeah.
we've made many of our decisions. But we do have some folks coming back.
I think we should keep it moving.
I'm open to a submission.
Yeah, submit, we'll talk about it when we get to the table.
Okay.
And I suspect that if there's some wiggle room within our, like if we haven't hit our threshold, there might be some consideration, but if we hit our threshold, it may not be.
Yeah, and we do have some funding already to take us through till the end of May, and we're going to be talking to some other folks as well, and including going back to the Real Estate Foundation of BC. And just a heads up for you all is Squamish has actually been looked at as leaders in moving food policy forward, and so ourselves, Bella Coola and Revelstoke have been the movers and shakers. So yeah,
Cool.
so it's cool.
Great job, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, cool.
Thank
It's
you.
like a mini Squamish.
Yeah.
Similar to the estuary and fjord
It's
and
just,
geography.
yeah.
All right, next up, we've got our development project.
Take your glasses out.
Our glasses on.
Get your glasses out for the fine print.
We can start doing it on larger pieces of paper.
I got new glasses, so there.
I got the large piece.
Yeah, I can read this stuff now.
I have a special request.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jonas Lenischus, Director of Development Services, and I am presenting today the monthly list of active projects. We have 4 new development applications at the time when this spreadsheet was generated, but there are others since then. So the green highlighted applications are the new ones at the very top. And we have also highlighted the very first one, 2017-89, which is on Main Street. I believe it's kitty corner to the library. Right on the other side of the main.
Is that the old house?
I believe so. It's basically where the main development is going in, it's across the lane.
Yeah.
of the main.
Just north of the school district offices.
Yes. And the reason why I highlighted it is because we'll be talking later today about prioritizing development applications. And this looks like an application that would fit really well into the proposed review process because they are proposing all affordable, affordable housing over top of 2 stories of commercial space and parking. So it's 20 units. I'm not sure exactly how much commercial space is being proposed. It's a fairly small property. So this would fit really well, and I guess we'll see how the second agenda item goes, but we've identified this as a good fit for testing it out. That's all I had. If there's any questions.
Any other questions, council, on this list?
Of the green ones?
Any of them? Any of the green ones or the new ones? Yeah, Doug?
So 2 questions. One of them not on here, but there was a news article about a business going into the BC Rail old yard, and I'm wondering if that's been subdivided because they talked about a long-term lease.
So if this is the business that's going into the large facility, the 89,000
Car
square
shop,
feet, yeah, it wasn't a subdivision. They've got, I believe, a long-term lease from BCR, but there hasn't been a subdivision application.
Because it's a building.
Yes.
Yeah. I was just curious because it does make a difference financing. I was just wondering where they're at because we've been after them to try to put some lands aside for subdivision so that tenants could get long-term financing with that.
They're at the business licensing stage at the moment.
Did you want to add that, Linda?
Just quickly, the North Yards hasn't been subdivided at all in terms of the province and BCR property.
That was the question.
Okay, I've got Susan, Peter, Patty.
And me again afterwards.
Oh,
I'll
you
go
want
to
to
the
go
end.
now?
I'll go to the end of this.
Okay.
The Chikai Ranch application, is it being referred to the First Nations as well?
It will be if it proceeds. I think we may be advising the applicants to continue on the temporary use permit basis rather than rezoning for now. So we see, it hasn't been an application that's been moving very quickly since we received it.
Okay, and then the Third Avenue application is connected, that's the senior center, separate application, those 2 are connected?
The
Senior center, Polygon Homes and the Third Avenue,
yes, there are 2 connected.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Peter.
On the Amaji, you might have the understanding that it's a 6-story, then, two parking levels, 4 stories above that.
That's correct, yes. So 1 level of commercial at the street level and then another story of
And
parking.
that's the one just back up the street here, is it not?
Yeah, it's right across from the Amaji 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't know where that would be. Can you describe that?
It's that empty lot on 2nd Avenue.
That's nice.
Oh, okay.
The big empty lot that's recently been approved for the development. This is the second, I guess it's the same applicant that's on the other side of the street. A smaller scale development.
So it's 6
That's where Hudson House was.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it just wasn't.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, that's right.
confused me.
Apologies.
That good for you?
Yes, sir.
All right, Patty.
I was going to ask what Maji, but that was answered. So the 1,000 Laramie, the land use contract, the province wants us to get rid of these in the next 6 years or something. 5 years, 4 years.
Yes.
And I don't want to prejudge this at all, I don't know much about it, but why would we, at this point, consider something that's within a land use contract when we're going to have to get rid of it in a number of years anyway, and why wouldn't we just go and rezone this now? Like, you know, we're going to have to rezone it, we're going to have to give it zoning in the future.
Yes,
So why would we do something so close to a deadline that's going to be changed in a couple years?
So the land use contract has essentially frozen the zoning regulation that was in place when it was instituted, which I believe was in the 70s. So that's the zoning they have today, and under that zoning there is potential for subdivision. we are planning to deal with all of the land use contracts. We have a handful of them around when we do our zoning bylaw
Let me
update.
rephrase. Why would we not, when we have land use contract issues come up, simply put them through, instead of just amending or dealing with, that's the opportunity to basically say, okay, let's actually do our work on the land, like, get that done, as opposed to do it as a one-off, because that's what they can do today. Like, it almost seems to me, and maybe is like, we don't, our goal is not to just work with existing land use contracts, because they have a shelf life of 5 years or so, but to use the opportunity, if then someone wants to have a conversation about their parcel under land use contract, to actually say, okay, we have to do this anyway, let's actually move this into a proper, we're gonna have to do it anyway.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what we've been recently advising applicants when it comes up for a variance, let's say, that we would want to deal with the land use contract. It's just that I'm not sure yet if there is going to be any variance request coming out of this subdivision application or not. So we would have to look deeper into the application and go through the preliminary review process to find out whether there is any leverage for the district to say that we would want to deal with the land use contract at the subdivision stage.
It seemed to me that landowner would be much better to actually get a proper new designation than just to go off what existing land use contract parameters are there, like.
Absolutely, but I think we also need to look at whether the zoning under the land use contract is still relevant today, you know, within the geographical context.
And the flood hazard management plan.
Oh, and there's other
Yes.
variables there too,
Yeah.
for sure.
So not all land use owners may be willing to go there until it's until the contract expires, or we take the step forward and rezone it.
Have you had that conversation with them?
I'd have to look at our pre-application notes.
Do they realize that the land use contracts are gonna have to be disposed of in a couple of years anyway? And
Yes, they are aware of it.
You good, Patty? We've got Doug, Susan.
Thank you. Same property. Is that property under the flood hazard management plan, is that one of the properties that's in a no-build area or no-develop area?
That's right. No
I know, I
further
understand this is an
densification.
AO decision, it's approving officer decision,
Yes.
but it is in that no-build zone.
I believe the language in the flood hazard management plan is no further densification.
The applications within the current land use contract, within what it allows.
I see.
Is that all you, Doug?
That's it, thank you. Yeah.
Susan?
Thanks, so Garibaldi Springs, that was supposed to come a while ago, and they chose not to show up. Is it coming to council soon?
It's likely coming back to council early in the new year. We're still working on resolving some questions around park maintenance and the costs associated with that.
That's exactly it. If that financial model comes, we get that before it shows up at council, the financial.
Yes, it will come, whatever gets presented to council will come with the staff report in advance of the meeting.
Okay, so I'm just making sure, I just want to make sure that we have the full strata cost variables with how they plan to fund the costs and the legal implications of that. Yeah, if it's a strata paid for piece of land, and they can shut up, if the strata can decide not to pay for it anymore as a strata decision.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
All right.
And I have another question. So on the purpose-built rental, the first one, and speaking generally, I was just curious about the structure of these, and we've seen others come up through the rezoning process in different developments. But I take it the idea here is that we would set the parameters in the sense that dictate the percentage of market value and the formula and so forth, but they would manage it. Am I correct in saying that?
Exactly, yeah.
And they will
it's-
continue to own them.
Yes.
and we would just cover that off with a covenant on title or some nature.
A housing agreement, which would be done through a bylaw and a covenant. And then we would be monitoring, or they would have to do annual reporting essentially to make sure that it meets the housing agreement requirements.
Are there any, and I'm just trying to remember with some of the rezonings we've had, are there any where they would actually be dedicated to the district?
Where the units would be handed over to the district?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
So in terms of an amenity, in our, and I don't want to get too specific, but in terms of an amenity then, is it the difference in value that forms the basis for the amenity calculation?
There's a few ways of looking at it. What we have done in the past is looked at, okay, what is the construction value of the units? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to the users whether the district owns it or whether the developer owns it. It's what it would cost the district to go out and build these units. That is the amenity value.
Except that we don't get the revenue.
No, we don't.
It's fundamental.
Hold on, I got Peter on the list.
Oh, thank you. Question, the item here is industrial use update for the north part of the business park. There's a bylaw there, 2523, talking about the changing of zoning. Sorry, yeah, 2017-24.
Okay, this is, I'm not sure why it showed up actually. This is the MUD 1 rezoning that the district did, which is completed.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be on this list.
That's why I was asking.
Yes.
Thanks.
Patty?
Yeah, I think we have to really think about how we make that evaluation, that formula on what the value of the actual community amenity is. It's, from my perspective, it's not just the value of like how much it costs to build the things, because it's Doug pointed out, there's a whole, you know, you're gonna make your money over time. So I'm not happy with how we're evaluating that.
I guess we haven't had to evaluate.
You don't have to respond.
Because
I'm not happy.
because we've been focusing on delivering units out of these developments rather than looking at the value. So we have a few developments that have, you know, offered 5%. We're now moving in more towards 10%. So we really haven't had to deal with this question in terms of presenting a value of a CAC because we've been focusing on units.
Well, I think it's a whole CAC conversation that I think we're going to have, so pursue it at this point. I just wanted to say that I don't think that's actually where it should be equating the value of the CAC.
Doug, do you want to add to that?
Well, I agree, it's a bigger discussion than today, but there was a draft CAC policy circulated a couple of months ago, I think, and I remember reading it, but I don't recall this issue sort of catching, at least I missed it if it was there. I had other thoughts, but are we looking for a discussion on that relatively soon? Is that
likely be January? The draft that council saw in September had non-market units as not requiring to provide a CAC. They are the CAC, because that's exactly what we want. They're giving it to us. Well, they maintain ownership, but we get a unit that's affordable, which is, if we took cash, we'd build a unit that's affordable.
Yeah.
So
there's a discussion there, I guess. Yeah. So, but it is coming to us. That's
yeah.
So I have a question that's not related to this list, but the province provided guidance on how they'll be distributing marijuana, recreational marijuana yesterday? Today, it was this morning. And so I'm wondering if, I know we've got our regulations in place, but have we looked at setting aside some resources in 2018 in case we need to do some work to update our bylaws or respond to the changes that the province is making, because it looks like distribution will be through the Liquor Control Board if they're going to use for both private and public sales.
Let's refer to budget.
So, it's, you know, it's
We are expecting that we will have to do some adjustment once the province establishes the regime. And I suspect that next year and into the future years, we're going to be operating the same way in terms of staff resourcing, where the planners that are working on development files also take about 10 to 20% of their time, and they work on policy projects, and this would be a good project, so it could fit. We're expecting that we'd be able to fit it in current staffing levels.
anything else on the list? Okay, next item on our agenda is the prioritizing development applications. So this came out of some direction at the last CDC committee meeting, and staff brought back a proposal for us to consider and provide input.
Thank you. So yes, this came up at the last CDC meeting, is looking at establishing parameters for those applications that will get priority in terms of the review process. So since the last meeting, we've looked at some of the potential priority areas, as well as the thresholds that could be assigned to applications that will qualify to a review process, and also looked at what are the kind of process efficiencies that we could make a commitment to. So for today's purposes, we'd like to cover off those three items, and then hopefully we could come back to council at the next meeting with a policy. So in terms of priority areas, housing, employment space, and energy efficiency, we have identified as the top three. In terms of housing, there's the affordable non-market rental housing, and then there's the market rental housing, both of which we are in demand for today. In terms of a minimum threshold, we didn't want to set the bar overly high to the point where it would be unlikely that some of these developments would make the choice from going from good to great. So we're suggesting 30% of principal dwelling units for affordable non-market as being the minimum, or 50% as being market rental housing. In terms of employment space, it would be any development that is outside of these primary commercial industrial areas where we see commercial or industrial development only. So essentially mixed-use developments where more than 30% or 30% of the total gross floor area is dedicated towards employment use. And in terms of energy efficiency, developments proposing to meet step 4 or higher of the forthcoming BC building code, the step code, and that would be 100% of the development. We want to talk about this list first before we...
Yeah, I've got a question.
Thanks. Outside of primary commercial and industrial areas, why wouldn't we just, it's a very small incentive, first of all, to jump the queue. It's not really a financial incentive, it just gets projects off the ground. I think that's a great idea. But why wouldn't we just incentivize all employment land areas, since we lack employment land space right now?
Well, I think we would get, there's the philosophical question, are we trying to get these commercial developments faster, or are we trying to get more commercial development where it otherwise wouldn't happen, right? If we're talking about doing anything, so the business park and some of our commercial areas, I think we'd just get overwhelmed by those developments because there are quite a few of them happening that it relates more to one of the limitations in the future slide is, we don't want to take on too many projects because not everything can be a priority then.
I'm talking about commercial buildings, not C4 zone buildings with some ground floor retail. That's not a commercial space building. I'm talking about a full comprehensive building. You should be incentivizing, or we should be incentivizing complete comprehensive buildings. And that's it.
So we
as
could...
primary employment spaces, not...
So you'd be 100%.
100% commercial. No,
Yeah, we could play with that threshold if council wishes to.
Yeah, and I think it should be all areas, any place that can build a comprehensive building that's, if the land's zoned for it and somebody wants to not convert it to a C4 zoning and actually put in comprehensive, they should jump the queue ahead of anything that is housing with commercial underneath, because that's even, you know, we still in the end need commercial in our downtown, and all we're getting is projects with density above and commercial below, and we also, you know, that really affects the ability of retail to survive at all, because you're taxed at extreme residential rates, which we're seeing in Vancouver. People are shutting down left, right, and center.
Okay, so after your question, like all these hands went up, so can I go to staff?
Yes, so we could increase that percentage. I would rationalize the percentage in a way that we want those applications that are coming in at 20% to go higher. I don't think anyone's going to make a choice based on the faster process to go from 10 or 20% to 100%, right? So that's where we want to make sure that it's that people will go for it.
Does that get to where we go though?
I think
Does that get where the, like, does
Well,
that
just
get
in-
to employment space?
I'm sorry?
Maybe. So let Gary respond and then we'll.
I think if we followed this, we would have had one of the downtown applications prioritised in the last couple of years. There's only one that's met that 30, so it's looking for something that's quite unusual or exceptional in terms of what we typically see downtown.
Which one is it?
It was the one that was on Second and was it, we didn't get approved actually.
Actually,
So I
Okay,
think,
forget,
well, Pac West is the proposal for Pac West is coming close to it. I think their gross floor area is close to 29%. Commercial, yes.
do you want to follow up? Okay, and then I've got, after Susan, I've got Doug, Ted, and Patty.
But their density is going to be opposed, so they're not going to be able to afford to put, like, we still don't have a balance of parking regulations. We still haven't figured out how to get parking, commercial and residential in one space. We need to incentivize commercial buildings so that we have full, just commercial buildings, not residential and commercial. And all we've got as applications are people residential with ground floor commercial, which doesn't meet any of our needs. So, well, it meets our housing needs, that's fair enough. But where in our commercial areas, we need to start incentivizing commercial that are solely commercial buildings. So how do we get that when I don't think we followed the policy of making parking and residential and commercial all compatible in one space. So I think that lends itself to just residential ground floor retail.
So,
Jonas, I'll go to you, and then I'm going to go to other councillors.
okay. We do have the bylaws coming forward on December 19th for the downtown update, which will require, if they are approved, they will require 20% commercial. What we're suggesting is then, you know, providing some incentives for those applications to go from 20% to 30%. We could go to 100%, but again, the likelihood is going to be less that there's going to be applications that get incentivized that way.
Yeah, it's not a big enough incentive to approve.
Okay. Doug.
Thank you. So, and I was probably one of the people that voted for this, looking at this and having a discussion about it. But after I read the report, I think I'd have to disagree. I think we want a fairly high threshold, and I wouldn't want to lose sight of our, what I would call our base level of service, because I think since I've been on council, we've been working to streamline processes, improve turnaround times, make it user-friendly, investor-friendly, and so forth, and I wouldn't want to lose that. So for me, for somebody to jump the queue, it would have to be a pretty steep test, and I would expect most of the applications to get a really high level of service, and now we're talking about something that's exceptional. And without getting into discussion of whether it should be 30 or 40% or anything like that, I mean, that was just my general view of it after it came back, because I think otherwise everything becomes a priority. And then the ones that are kind of the business as usual, standard stuff that follow our zoning bylaws, get shot off into a dark pit somewhere and just basically forgotten. So I don't want to see that. I think the bottom level of service should be a fairly high standard, and then maybe there's exceptional circumstances that will bring somebody forward. But I think it should be a high threshold, not a low threshold.
Are any of those, do those meet your exceptional standard? Just to add some clarity to your comment.
In the first two, I don't know, frankly, I didn't focus on the numbers. I think I would raise probably everything there. I take 110%, that's perfect. I take Susan's point about primary employment space maybe more than 30%, because I mean our zoning bylaw, at least in parts of the downtown, is now 2 floors of commercial. Maybe that's not 30%.
Not quite yet.
So it's pretty close. Not quite yet, but that's the way we're headed. So maybe for somebody to jump the queue, we're looking for another Cornerstone building, which is entirely commercial. That might justify jumping the queue, but not when the purpose is to get 4 floors of residential, because we don't need to jump anybody's queue for that. You know, that's kind of a key part of it. As far as the market housing and so forth, affordable non-rental, we just have an application here where it's 100% of the dwelling units are going to be non-market rental. Maybe our threshold is higher than 30%.
The reason why we set it at 30% is we know there are developments out there that are coming forward that will have to do 30% of their units as rental housing. So that provision would facilitate those units from going from rental to affordable rental, because I think there's not that big of a jump there. So that's why we recommend 30%, is because we could actually see these applications coming forward that could end up being affordable housing units.
Yeah, I guess I can be persuaded one way or the other in those things when you look at the specifics, but it's just a general statement. I think the focus should be on the base service level, and we consider these to be quite exceptional. So, because I think the rest of our bylaw package, if it's where we want it to be, that will encourage some provision of this. And so we don't have to do it to get some market rental. We should be getting that anyway, just on the base level of service, if you like. And it's the ones that go like the one we just looked at, 100% non-market rental. Holy smokes, well that's a step above the usual application, so let's give that one priority.
Thanks, Doug. Ted, Patty, and then Susan.
Yeah, and of course, anybody building can go to step 4 of the step code and get 100%. So, you know, if you throw in a higher quality building, you're where you're at. That's big. But just to the, like, commercial, like we're always talking about commercial, 2nd floor, 3rd floor, let's get more commercial. And I've heard Doug Day get up and say, let the market dictate. When there's time and a need for commercial, somebody will build a commercial building. And I don't know if we've ever had that discussion, because I know to a lot of people that are planning on building, having 2 and 3 stories of empty commercial space isn't making them happy. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because it somewhat makes sense to me to let, if there's a need, you know, what I'm starting to see now is every building's going to have 2 floors of commercial. And if you get all those buildings that are coming on with 2 floors of commercial, there's going to be a lot of empty commercial. We just don't have that. I don't think we've ever really assessed how much we need. Oh, I mean, I guess I know we have, but it just seems like that we're going after a long target there.
So what would you like to see, Ted?
Well, that's
What would your incentive be for employment space to prioritize it?
Well, 100%. If someone wants to build 100%,
100%. Okay, that's your question.
then you're getting a building that's all commercial, and then it'll be on one of the corners somewhere or wherever it is, and it's a commercial building. But But to keep forcing everyone to go with two floors of commercial, I just don't know if that's gonna be the long-term right way to go.
Okay, Jonas?
Just want to clarify that we're not proposing multiple stories of commercial in this upcoming update to the downtown neighborhood plan. We're proposing a minimum percentage, could be all on one floor, could be on multiple floors. And it is in line with the employment land strategy, which assumed the draft downtown neighborhood plan land use is being built out.
But the employment land strategy is not taking into account all the commuters we have. It's just based on Vancouver's numbers, Whistler's numbers. It's not based on how many commuters you have in towns. And then, so then on the step 4 thing there, I mean, that one there is, you know, that's a real nice thing to have there. I mean, if you want to go to that, I mean, step 4 is not that much more expensive than a regular one. So I think we'll probably get a lot of ground on that one.
Jonas, did you want to respond before I go to Patty?
Just very quickly, and the point is a bit of an experimentation here. This is going to be a policy. You know, we're going to try this out, and it might fail. It might, you know, we might get too many priority projects. So it's a bit of an experiment. We don't really know the consequences on resources and how feasible it is to do it, but it's worthwhile doing it.
Okay, Patty?
I think something to keep in mind is this is just one tool to help prioritize. We still are going to have rezonings that are going to be discretionary and DPs that have discretionary aspects to them. So that whole decision making isn't taking this out. And I think one of my things is to make sure that it's priority in processing. Approval still is a totally other branch that needs to be done. So just to make sure that that's clear with how, with the communication as they come in. The other thing too, I think Susan's comments highlight this, is that whatever percentages we have there, if we don't have the zoning to sort of back up some of our goals, you know, this is to sort of get above and beyond what existing zoning requires, or existing community amending, whatever.
Yes.
So this is to get above and beyond what our existing, if we need to change our policies in zoning, we should change our zoning policies. This is just a way of dealing with the overload that we have now and getting the projects that we really want and need percolated to the top and processed in an efficient way. Just on the energy efficiency one, I think that's a fairly easy one. Step 4, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the current BC building code is essentially step 1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that?
Step 1, step 2.
Is maybe in between. Well, why would you even go to step 1 if the current ground
Step
zero?
one.
That's step 1.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
We'll bring that back to you.
Yeah, like why have step 1 if it doesn't exceed the current code? Anyway, maybe that's just a flaw in how they've done this. Either way, let's say it's step 2. To go to step 4 is a significant difference, and as Jonas iterated, we play it by ear. If we're getting a lot of applications at step 4, we move this prioritization to step 5 to try to get everyone that one step further. People, I think the point that Jonas is trying to make is we can put 100% employment space in there. We probably won't get any applications meeting that, trying to use that, because the difference in their revenue potential doesn't exceed a 6-month or a year-long improvement in their processing time, or whatever that may look like. So I think you have to be kind of realistic. If we want to get 100% purpose-built employment buildings, we have to do more than simply create a priority project. We have to do RTEs on that only. We have to do, there has to be something else, because that's just not going to be incentive enough to really, I think what Jonas is trying to say, let's get, and maybe it's 30% above what's currently required in the zoning, as opposed to a GFA, or like, I'm not sure if there's a different way of articulating that, but the idea is to get more. You're offering more, you get prioritization, and the developer will weigh. Yep, it's worth my while to get in ahead of all my competitors and process this, and then I get in the ground next, and then I can dictate market a bit better than if I'm waiting 2 years to build something because the market's flooded. because really they control it all anyway. But I think, so just to keep it realistic, 30% may be a little too low. I don't want to get into the Salterra development. There's a whole other decision points on the Salterra development. And I think, I just want to make sure these are realistic in terms of actually being incentives. So we don't think we can, and I think I just want to reiterate one point that Jonas made is, this is iterative. We put it out there, if we don't see we see too much, and we can't prioritize anything because everything's become a priority, then we change the threshold. But we have to keep on top of it to realize but I like the idea of doing this. I think we might push them a little bit more and see if we get any traction a little bit more of some of those areas. But you just have to realize this is one of many tools to actually get what we're trying to get into the future.
All right, Susan.
Thanks. I don't like iterative. I think we need goals, and we need to meet the goals with zoning, and we have to include all our plans, our economic development plans, and if we want places for employment, then we need to zone for places of employment and look at C4 zoning. C4 zoning blankets the downtown. There's literally 4 lots that are available for commercial, for commercial buildings right now that are solely zoned for commercial. So if we want more commercial buildings, we have to zone in our OCP for commercial.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, but not let's try this and see what happens. I'm tired of that sort of approach. The energy efficient is, like, I just built a house, it was almost impossible to get what it took in our code, the mismatch between our bylaws and step 4 needs to be adjusted first, because there's things that you can't do. Like the spray foam in the walls was a really big problem and that was just one simple thing that is step 4 or higher that we couldn't, that was difficult to get through the building department. So we have to figure out what we want out of energy. Are we looking for more passive homes? Are we looking for energy, what does that actually mean, step 4 for our community, and do our bylaws line up with that? I'd rather spend time and energy with planning that would go into step 4 housing, advancing the movement of an application, to resourcing, making sure that our bylaws and that everything in our bylaws aligns with making it easy for people to get through step 4. Because I think if you're trying to advance a process that is difficult to begin with, then resourcing it by jumping the queue actually doesn't work very well, because it actually means more time and energy spent on something because the bylaws don't line up.
Okay, so maybe staff, can you comment on, we are preparing for the new building code, because it will be a reality by the end of 2018. So how does prioritizing something to step 4 align with our ability to approve something to step 4?
So
Easily, I think that's the question the Councilor Chappelle is asking.
Step 4 and our bylaw are going to be completely aligned. I mean, we're going to be following the step code and the building code. So there's going to be no discrepancy between our bylaw and the building code.
Perfect. Yeah. That wasn't the case in the summer, but I'm glad it's changed since then.
It's changing.
But the code is changing.
Yeah.
So
And our building bylaws.
So our building bylaws have to change in accordance with that.
Yes. The
When you're
provincial,
in the middle ground and you're exceeding the code,
It's difficult.
it is.
So I wonder how that lines up with jumping the line when it takes more time and resources to actually get through the process.
what we're talking about is the planning applications as well as servicing agreement, site alteration permits. Like, that's the part of the scheme. We have not included the building permit review in this proposal. We can look at that, but the resources are more stretched, I would say, at the building stage than they are at the planning stage.
Yeah, excellent. Okay.
Does that help?
Yep, that's it.
Ted?
You don't use spray foam in step 4. I totally forgot what I was going to ask.
Ted?
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing all these comments, and I realize from staff's comments on they're actually looking to target some of the applications that are coming at them. So for staff, they're saying if we do the 30% here, this is going to be good because it's going to get these people that are coming at us. So for that reason, I think it's great because we might not quite understand what staff's saying, but I know that staff's targeting to get the best out of this. So I think I support this.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
I was trying to understand what Councillor Chappelle was saying. Because I think we have building bylaw issues, we have zoning issues, we have variance issues. All that stuff is all discretionary decision-making outside of this prioritization process. And they do have to marry. And that's going to be iterative because I think we're going to have to learn. The whole idea of iterative is about learning as you're going along. So I think the process of learning as we go along is important. What I'm trying to understand is if does council, does the committee think we want to, and I think I'm hearing we want to create prioritization in the processing, not in the approval, the processing of files. And there's a strategy behind what staff is proposing. And council members have commented on about, they think, one should be higher or we should be incentive. We think we can create more employment space, let's increase that number. It might be 100, it might be 50. I think we have to be realistic in creating benchmarks for, or thresholds for how to prioritize processing, how to get them. We have, 89 applications in 2017. Maybe 10 of them get priority focus.
Well, this limits it to 5 right now.
Okay, you're correct, currently, that's right. So this limits to 5, we understand our capacity to deal with 5, and we learn, we decide in the future if we can do 10 or we can do 2. So, and it could be the first in the door, just gets it, and then we may have something come in and it looks like a really good project. Yeah, let's put it in the priority list. It might be number 6. That's what I mean by iterative. We have to learn from what we're going through. I agree. I don't think 30% of GFA is really incentivizing it to actually get something like that in the priority list. But I think if we put it to 75, we're just going to get no one biting. You have to add more incentives in just process in order to get some of those things. And we have to bring our zoning and building bylaws up to date so that we're able to achieve these things. I actually was hoping that the energy efficiency one would actually affect our building inspection side of things. I think that's where I'd actually like our building inspectors to be able to prioritize people at early steps, so step 4 and step 5. Because then we can really incentivize it if it's through the building process. If it's through planning and stuff, we're missing a whole bunch of potential to incentivize step 4 and step 5. But there may be a whole other strategy in terms of how we actually do that. But I actually think building inspection should be, particularly on the energy efficiency side, something that we actually prioritize to get people to go above and beyond step 2 and step 3.
Susan.
Thanks. I actually found our building inspectors absolutely excellent and on time and able to inform me about ways we wanted energy efficient. And they were great at saying, this is what you can do to go that extra step. And that was, that was just our normal process. I mean, it was excellent. So I'm wondering, I just thought, is there a way that for our residential energy efficient buildings that we can somehow have classes or workshops or something with people and maybe require attendance and then they jump the line, or so that there's something that you have to do in order to come forward, in order to, that you have to have done X number of education so that you know that that person is going to implement step 4 properly. And I think Ted's done some classes in that, so maybe.
Well, I was going to say.
So hold on. So just that was a question directed at staff.
Yeah.
I know the new building code's coming in 2018. Can you provide any insight into how we're preparing the district, our local contractors, anything like that, to be ready for this?
Through the chair, we plan on bringing the bylaw back as soon as we can. It's likely going to be in January now. Once we get council agreed on, okay, that's the step that we want to go to, it's likely to be 1 or 2. We're planning a bunch of outreach, education sessions that have been pushing information packages with applications, pushing them on the web, and hosting real educational hands-on workshops about what it means, what you will need to do, how you can do it, professionals you can engage. It just becomes very administratively burdensome to then track an educational process and say, well, if you pass, you get on the fast track, if you don't pass. What we're trying to do here is establish a fairly simple threshold beyond which you get on the fast track for review. With respect to the more complex buildings, as the Mayor I think is hinting, there is a way that the new bylaw allows for
Professional, it's a certified professional program.
Certified professional, whereby essentially your engineers, your consultants verify they're going to comply. We literally stand back and you're off and running. You do your own inspections with your own professionals, and that's a great way of really speeding up the Part 3 buildings, the bigger, complex buildings.
Thanks, Harry. That's yes.
Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to reply to Susan's comment there. So as a home builder, you have to take lessons. You can't be a home builder now without taking lessons.
That's right, that just came in. You can still run the vote. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
When did we come in?
I think it was a year ago.
A year and a bit ago. Okay, so one of the questions I have, I like the threshold for energy efficient buildings. The piece on employment space, if we wanted to incentivize 100% commercial in the downtown, what else would we change? So would we waive rezoning fees for a C4 lot, for instance? I'd almost like to put 2 options there, the incremental change and then the full 100% commercial build downtown. Because, you know, in this whole move to try and get second floor commercial, the concern for me all the way along is that we dilute it across many, many buildings, and then you end up with potentially a situation Ted speaks of where you have empty commercial versus concentrating it in specific buildings. So we might have a lot of demand for commercial. Certainly we need to build for it. It was in the employment land strategy, and that's a piece of work that Kate's trying to match now through her work. It's how much. But I wonder if we play around with trying to incentivize that 100% build in the short term. So we have an incremental level, but maybe there's a suite of incentives we can see if we might entice someone to build us 100%. Can we try both? I guess
We could
my
try
thought.
both, but what I'm hearing is a separate system then of incentives like zoning, building permit fees, maybe an RTE, things that could be talked about in this policy but would have to live outside of it. We're trying to do a quick one here.
Yeah.
Get those good projects to great, or those projects that are gonna have to be meeting, the downtown standards to go a little higher, just for policy. But we could look at, 2 tiers basically, one that's just under this policy and then one that maybe we implement over 2018. Because it will take time to draft those bylaw amendments.
Susan, Ted?
Thanks. I hope one day to see empty office space, because it means it becomes cheaper for people to be employed. And right now, our situation is desperate with no employment space And it's the same as housing, where you have supply and it's empty, the prices come down, and it makes it more viable for small businesses to enter the workforce. And right now, if you put it underneath a C4 plan zone, you're being taxed by BC Housing at residential rates and based on speculation. So we need more
BC, not
comprehensive.
BC Housing.
No, sorry, no, BC Housing, BC assessment. Yeah. BC Housing is a BC assessment.
They don't tax anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You look at what happened to the chocolate shop in Vancouver, their tax rate in their Dumpio building now exceeds their lease rate, which is exactly, we're balanced right now. Our tax rate is equal to our lease rate if you manage to negotiate a good contract, but it's creeping up. Our taxes are exceeding our lease rate. And the more we have ground floor and second floor resident units of underneath residential, the more the tax rate is assessed at future value of housing. So it's not viable, basically, for employment, unless you're looking for massive companies. But if you want small and medium-sized businesses in spaces, you need to have empty office space and abundance of office space so you have choice in the market. Otherwise, you're forced to negotiate with people that aren't landlords for commercial real estate. They're shoving in commercial real estate so that they can build 6 to 8 story condos and sell them and get out of the market. They're not
So
looking
just
for
for clarity, as someone who was a huge proponent of second floor office space,
yeah.
now you disagree with that?
Well,
and
I
you just
wanted
want
it in
100%.
C4 because C4 is what we have. We don't have any commercial zoned office space. I would be advocating for more commercial zone, which now I'm realizing, you know, when I've looked, it was just recently that we started seeing those tax craziness, and literally we're going to school in downtown Vancouver where the whole Granville Street is up for rent now because of tax rates, like $120,000 a year in taxes for a ground floor retail space. So it's really difficult to stay on top of keeping up with the residential market when your prices are increasing so rapidly. So how do we maintain our employment land is a question, I guess. Second floor office space is cheaper than ground floor office space. So yes, I'd like, if we're going to keep C4 zoning, we have to have second floor office space. What I prefer to see is more comprehensive buildings mixed in with our residential. Pure residential buildings, pure commercial buildings. Those tax rates are kept separately, and it becomes more affordable and gives a variety of work opportunities, ground floor retail, coffee shops, and then maybe rooftop patio, drinking situations.
I never said drinking.
Did I see your hand up?
Nope, I think
I've
God
got,
was thinking.
Yeah,
I've got
there's
Ted and
various
Doug.
Commercial has a huge incentive already with zero parking required. Cleveland Avenue, you don't need any parking. So that's a huge incentive.
So can we just clarify that?
That's not correct.
What is it then?
That is correct.
Is
Sorry,
it?
Gary.
Is it?
It's on Cleveland Avenue, yes, you can
Just
buy out
Cleveland.
100% of your parking. However, the proposed changes to the zoning bylaw would change that, would apply a same standard across the downtown core for commercial parking.
So, for
But you have
example,
to buy it, you have to pay.
You still have to pay,
Yeah,
you have to buy it up.
There's cash in
Okay,
lieu.
cash.
So you're kind of both right.
so, but I'm just saying that's an incentive for an all commercial building. And then, you know, we could say, and I've been kind of advocating this for height, where do we want our towers? Because we're gonna have towers coming to town and they're just gonna be willy-nilly or where
Who says?
planning wants them. Unless we pick where they go. And so we could say, well, out where the liquor store is out in the corner, I mean, that big empty one-story mall is gonna go eventually. Let's approve towers there.
We are way off.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm just
Well, no,
about to bring
I'm
us
just,
back in.
yeah,
So-
okay, yeah, anyway, we could approve where all commercial goes and says this area here is zoned for commercial, no residential.
Okay, so we're trying to come up with
Yeah.
priority areas and thresholds. Doug?
Yeah, I want to be careful we don't misinform ourselves, because I think the scenario Councillor Chappelle related in the city of Vancouver, I follow the Vancouver media and I've seen those articles for the last half dozen years, and it's an assessment anomaly It's the BC Assessment Authority, and it's undeveloped sites that presently have 1 or 2 floor commercial, sort of old historic buildings on them, which now have potential for 30 stories of residential above them. So the land value that those buildings will contribute to, even though the residential is not built, is sky high. But once the building is built, then the residential pays its share of the taxes and the commercial pays its share of the taxes. So I don't think that is going to mess up our downtown because we may have the odd building or site where there's 1 or 2 floors of commercial right now, and maybe there's potential for a couple of floors of residential, so the land values have gone up a little bit, but if anything, it's an incentive to build it out. So once it's built out to the level of zoning, if it's all commercial, you won't be paying a residential rate because it's all commercial. So.
Steph, back to you. What have you heard so far from council in terms of these priority areas and thresholds?
I heard that everybody likes the energy efficiency standard at 100%. The employment space, I don't have a clear answer on. It ranges between 30% and 100%. We could look at a 2-tier system with heavier incentives on 100% and the proposed on the 30%. And I don't think we've talked about the market rental rate, 50%. And I'm not clear on affordable non-market rental housing. I've heard both arguments.
All right, so in half an hour, we've given you in this direction on one of those things. So let's try and provide a bit more clarity. Let's start with the housing piece. Comments on housing.
I think we have to look at this on how we're prioritizing the process. If we want to incentivize above and beyond, I think that's another program altogether. So for me, and I think I'm open to maybe 10% more on both of the housing pieces, but I think what we want to do is we actually want to have something that takes people to the next level without basically people going, it's unachievable. So that's the balance that we're looking for. I think staff put these forward because they think they might get that bit more out of development proposals that we can actually create it. We're going to learn from this, right? We're going to learn that maybe it's too low or maybe it's too high. Maybe it's not going to do anything, but we're trying to take the workload and say here we're trying to the better proposals, we're trying to percolate them to the top. This isn't going to solve all of our problems. This is just one little piece to how do we get the really good stuff to boil to the top. So on the housing, if staff think this is a good starting point, I'm okay with it. I'd be open to a little bit more, but if staff think that's actually going to have a counterproductive and just not incentivize anybody or not help people at all to sort of move to the next level, then I don't want to go there. And I think the employment space one, to be honest, I don't think it's going to incentivize anybody in the process unless we have a whole comprehensive package. So I think that's almost a bit of a separate item. This may be a good starting point. See if there's any takers. I doubt there will be. I don't think this is going to be enough to push them over the top. Anyway.
All right, Ted, on housing.
I'm 100% with that. I think staff done their homework on this and they're targeting with these numbers. So I think that if there's some that you guys see coming that you want to try and get them to lift up to the next level, that's like Patty says, I agree with that. The primary employment space secured with a covenant on title outside commercial and industrial areas. So this is outside commercial and industrial areas. This is like, oh, you want to build a duplex? How would you like to put in a corner store with that?
No.
No.
He wants to shake
No?
his head.
This is outside of areas where all you can do is commercial or
Yeah,
industrial.
so the business part,
All you
or
can
some
do is commercial?
C9 or
Yes.
C2 and business park, IE, blah, blah, blah.
That's right. Because
Anyway,
we would get,
I support the numbers.
Because they're at
because
100%
that's
already.
what staff's bringing forward and I think they have a handle on it.
Okay. Pete?
Yeah, I'm the same. I think just put it out there and let's just see what it does. I mean, it's the first kick at it. Let's see what it brings in or doesn't bring in and retool it from there.
Yeah, I can I'll go with Patty's comments on the housing. The employment space, I think I would go to 100%. And so in other words, we would prioritize, because this will apply significantly to the downtown area, or perhaps the ocean front, prioritize the total commercial or light industrial buildings. And if we don't think that the regular zoning is giving us enough employment space, then I think what we do is think about going to 2nd and 3rd Avenue with the same provisions we have for Cleveland Avenue, requiring a 2nd floor of commercial, and just extend the base, if you like, but not the priority. I think the priority, as I said initially, is for special things, and 100% commercial downtown for me is a special item. So I would prioritize that.
I agree with Doug. I think that's a great idea to extend it to 2nd and 3rd Avenue.
And that's
to
outside
visit
this
them.
Different discussion.
That's
I
good.
guess.
Just to want to update council, that's what we are proposing to do with this downtown update. Anything C4, which does extend to 2nd, and in the future will probably extend to 3rd.
Anybody in the audience want to comment?
Good discussion so far.
Jonas, Nadia, what do you think?
Now I think I've got pretty good clarity. So just to confirm on employment space, you'd like to go higher than 30%.
I think the general consensus is that it needs to be an exceptional
Okay.
increase.
Perfect, crystal clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good work.
Doesn't mean 31%.
Well, I think bottom line is, you're not gonna get a 60% commercial building. Very rarely will you get something like that. So
Exactly.
I'm okay to go to 100, but I don't think we're gonna get many takers. We'll see.
It's got to be either 30 or 100 because there's going to be nothing in between.
Yeah. So I think we'll go with 100 for now, and I think there may be other pieces that need to be figured out if we really want to incentivize that. But that's outside of the scope of this conversation.
Thanks, Jonas. Great. Thank you, council, for that discussion. That was helpful.
Some of those will apply to you.
Okay, status of recommendations to council. Robin, do I have to say anything here? I mean, I don't have that revised motion in front of me for a minute.
We'll just add in
Okay.
from, it was adopted at the last council meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna add the revised motion that was adopted at the last regular council meeting into the CDC minutes for November 7th. Any other roundtable discussion, debrief, or topics you want me to send Jason from this meeting or future meetings? Susan?
I'm wondering what happened to the discussion on speed limits.
We had it when we were away.
Is it on the,
Yeah, we
it
did
wasn't on
discuss
the
that.
agenda?
It was on the agenda 3 months ago,
It wasn't in the meeting minutes.
in October.
Yeah, we did discuss that.
It was,
No,
Ted?
I would like to have a discussion of
it was on the agenda.
location of highlights in Squamish.
it was,
And how high? That's the more fun discussion.
Okay, we can have that, and I know when fire chief was here talking about their 5-year fire plan, we asked them to consider what it means for us to move to taller buildings, more than 6 stories. So that would need to be part of that discussion too, I think, so that we're getting a full picture of not only just how high, but what it means for us as a district to accommodate that. Any other topics? We had one today that we said was a larger conversation.
Oh, yeah, the oceanfront one's coming in January. Update, ocean update.
Actually, we got a request from the developer to push that to February.
Okay. Anyway, usually
Am I
staff
on the
really
right?
are driving this agenda.
Sorry.
I will find it for you.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, Linda?
Mr. Buxton is correct, but it's because we don't have a CDC meeting in January.
Oh, right.
That would
That
explain.
would explain why.
Super.
So we pushed it.
All right, motion to terminate. Moved by Peter, seconded by Doug. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.